Hi guys, welcome back to My Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Another fantastic day, another great day for an interview. I've got Jason Kendrick with me today. Jason is a fellow author and I'm dead excited to have him on the show. And really, Jason, quite rightly so, is all about connection and is all about the importance of human interaction. And going back in time, going 50 years back, there were experiments where essentially we have seen the importance of the connection. They took rats, put them into a cage, and then let them choose between heroin-laced water and water. And the rats went for the heroin, wanted to have a good time. Okay, fair call. Then they changed the experiment and they put the rats into Disneyland for rats with other sexy rats running around and doing what other rats are happily doing. And suddenly these rats having again the same choice between heroin-laced water and water. They went for the water. They didn't want to be numbed. They actually loved what was going on. So do rats actually have got a head start on us that they are programmed to actually look for the human connection, which we have lost with our masks? So that will be one of the many topics that we're going to address today. Jason, I'm so pleased to have you on my show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Stefan. It's been just a great journey to get to know you and to be in that Breakdown to Wake Up project with you, and then now to connect here. And I love what you do. There's so much in the world around addiction and unhealthy behaviors, and having outlets and information from those like you that have kind of been through that to help people really awaken and heal is such a good thing. And I know from my side, when we were just talking before, that I feel like connection is really the key, because we're missing that so much. I mean, we're losing a lot of the neighborhood connection, the village connection. You know, I remember growing up, we knew our neighbors and we played with the kids down the street. And now it seems like you have to make an effort to find out who lives right next door to you or in the same building on the same block. And so we're just, I guess, being trained or just losing the need for that connection, or just the thought that we should have this connection as part of our normal everyday healthy lives. And maybe it's just because we don't understand the benefits of what human connection really brings to our lives, and us being human animals, we need that connection. And it goes all the way back to babies. You know, if a baby doesn't have human connection or hugs or touch, they may not even survive.
And we see that there are enough examples of orphanages in not so nice parts of the world where the behavior that results from these young, poor beings being completely neglected, not necessarily starved in real terms, although obviously malnutrition is often a role there too, but it's the human connection that is missing. And these people these are strange people that are growing up there. So no, you're so right. How did you come onto that? I mean, how you realized that this was one of the key things as far as your work is concerned, but where did it arose in your own growth?
Well, I mean, like most of us, you teach best what you most need to understand. And in my life, I live with now what's called complex PTSD, which is, a more subtle form of the normal PTSD, which is really trauma based. Mine is more of the same thing. It's from neglect, and it was not from a neglectful family who didn't love me or who didn't care for me. It was more of just that time of generation where both my parents worked. I went to school, and so they were busy putting food on the table, and they had their careers and these different things. And it was just kind of a more of a unknowing or ignorance around what connection and what children need and what healthy emotional upbringing is. And so I just kind of grew up in this. My family is military, and so we moved around a lot, and then they're always working. And then as we moved around a lot, I didn't have necessarily those foundational connections. I didn't really, I'm always having to make new friends, different places. And so it just came into this thing where I learned to be more of a chameleon and try to make everybody else happy. And I wanted to be liked and all these different things. And it wasn't until many years later when I had many failed relationships and I'm going, all right, fine. I'm in my 30s, late 30s now, and I'm obviously the common denominator in all these relationships. So maybe I should start looking at me and heal whatever's going on within me. And that journey of going through a lot of personal development and different studies of neurolinguistics and personal development and these things, where I came across complex PTSD and neglect and these things, and it was really interesting because one of the probably most detrimental things about complex PTSD is that it is so subtle. And I remember asking myself and wondering, why am I struggling so much? And why am I not as successful as Joe Blow or whoever? I don't have abuse or trauma or these things in my life. So why am I having these unhealthy patterns in my life? And it wasn't until I really was introduced to complex PTSD and how subtle it is, because it's more of a not having your needs and then replacing it with something else, and having this constant little things of little words or phrases or just things that are said to you that you take in, especially as a child, because you don't know any better. And it may be completely misconstrued, but as a child, you're egocentric. So you say, well, obviously there must be something wrong with me. So you take that in at face value and take that in as law. And then that starts to program and create these patterns within yourself and within your life. And so for me, it was really just a journey of self-discovery. And then once I finally discovered that, it was an epiphany of, oh, well, this makes so much sense why throughout my life I've isolated, I've self-sabotaged, I've gone in and out of addiction of different sorts, sex addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction, different things, where it's just looking for something to fill the hole. But as we know, nothing outside of me can feel that. And so I've been probably about a good 5 years now really on that journey of rebuilding and reconnecting and healing the inner child and the inner teenager, and really almost like I joke sometimes with my clients, it's like the Russian nesting dolls. We've got to put all those little dolls, all those little pieces back together to create the whole being. And so that's been part of my journey. And now I feel like it's time to bring this more to the masses because of alcoholism, drug abuse. I mean, coming from a military background here in the States, we have 22 to 30 different veterans killing themselves each day because they're lacking connection, they're lacking support, they are dealing with PTSD and trauma. And it's not getting any better because we're becoming more and more isolated. And so doing this work and bringing it to corporations and couples and families is really have become my passion, because it's such a necessity for us to not only just survive, but to thrive and to have healthy connection and healthy relationships, and to let go of all these unhealthy patterns of addiction and separation that we're really going through right now.
Some of our listeners and viewers might get a bit defensive from that, because whilst I utterly agree and understand, as you pointed out, we come from a generation where we were the key. In Germany, we call it Schlüsselkinder, and I think latchkey
kids. Yes.
Latchkey kids. I think that's so. You came home, you had your key around your neck, and then you sorted yourself out because mommy and daddy were working, and the generations before us, by necessity, there were many, many, many families who equally had to work. So therefore, that was the norm. And people around us might point out, well, actually, we didn't turn up this broken like this generation now is. So what has changed? I'm purely playing devil's advocate. I'm actually absolutely 100% agreeing with you. But what has changed?
I think the biggest difference is, and this is what it took me a while to figure out, because neither one of my parents are evil people. It wasn't like they didn't love me or anything. It was mainly because of their upbringing. And I know my father's especially. His father passed when he was 5 years old. So he was raised by his single mother, and basically his two older sisters had to babysit him and kind of raise him. And so he didn't really have that healthy masculine influence. And so emotional connection and being there to actually have the quality time wasn't something he experienced, so he didn't know to create that. So if both parents worked, but then once they came home, they had dinner and they decompressed and they really connected and were present with their kids, it a lot of times negated that feeling of neglect. For me, I kind of learned to walk on eggshells and to make sure I did enough to not basically be noticed or be seen, because him doing the best that he could with what he was given, his kind of fatherly pattern was to try to toughen me up. And by nature, I'm a sensitive empath. And so I just learned to kind of do what was necessary to kind of stay out of his way, because if he saw me, then he wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing. And he was very kind of critical and judgmental, and wanted to make sure I was, you know, doing my part and getting good grades and doing those things. But the way I took it was every time dad saw me, he was going to be judgmental, and I was going to be shown what I was doing wrong or that I wasn't enough again. And so it's not necessarily any outward thing, but it's almost these little things that we just don't think are that important, but become the catalyst for healthy relating and healthy families. Because we a lot of families, I know one of the reasons I always mention that would come from a military family, because that's always very task oriented. It's about getting the job done, and there's a bigger thing that we're working towards. And so sometimes the little things like the family connections can fall through the cracks. So for them, it was we've got food on the table, there's a roof over your head, we've got money, and you're taken care of, and that's what was most important. So we would forget the actual connection and the communication and that emotional support that a lot of us were just lacking, and not from any sort of malicious point of view, but that was just how they grew up. And that was how I grew up. And so for a lot of us now, especially in our generation, we're seeing these patterns and having to work through these generational traumas, work through these things, and be more aware and acknowledge them. And I think with a lot of the addiction, a lot of the suicides, a lot of the things that we're dealing with now, they're becoming so prevalent that we really can't ignore them. We're having to look back and go, well, where does this stem from? And a lot of this is very generational. I mean, it's not just one generation, but maybe three or four.
Very true. Very true. Do you know about the suicide statistics outside of the military? Because I mean, the 22 to 30 is just crazy if you look at it from a veteran's perspective.
I know the veterans one because that's close to my heart, being a veteran. Although I have seen a lot of the reports, especially here in the States, with teens to 30s during COVID, during all these things, becoming more suicidal, becoming more addicted, becoming more substance abusers because of the lack of connection. And I think in a lot of ways because we have had so many years of not focusing on connection and intimacy and emotional support, that it's just exacerbated these issues. Now we have a lot of young adults that don't have the training or the awareness to know what they need. And so like most of us, we don't know what we need, so we grasp on whatever helps to negate or whatever helps to mitigate those feelings. And so sometimes it just gets to that point of I can't do it anymore.
So true. And that's what I kept saying. That was the biggest realization in my life. Having been to rehab myself for 4 weeks, afterwards, it very quickly became clear to me that I want every 16-year-old mandatory to go to rehab for 4 weeks as part of their school curriculum, to actually learn about how to deal with negative emotions, to learn about all the issues of the connection, live an authentic life, etc., and getting the tools handed to them with which they then can address the trauma that will come during their lives, the challenges that will arise in front of them. There is no way that we can somehow protect our youngsters and put them into bubbles and have it all nice. No, you're not allowed to go on the internet. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. Oh my God, you could get hurt. Well, guess what they will try to do the moment you let them loose, and finally you have to. So now I subscribe to showing the youngsters how to live, and I think that is probably the biggest legacy I can do nowadays. I was certainly a very, like your dad probably, a very driven man, and still am. And to do small talk, a quotation mark, to just sit there, do nothing, is near torture to me. So there you are, maybe addicted to work. I don't know, you can call it whatever it is. But there is this flow and effect that I constantly have to work with. And it's not easy. There is not an easy way out. I mean, you must find yourself equally there. You're an author, you've written a book. To write a book means you work, and then you add in another 6 hours, 8 hours. And by the time it's actually published, that's a year out of your life in which you have done pretty much 2 jobs. So there you go. We fall into the same trap, isn't it?
Yeah, I was fortunate with my first 2 that I actually had a job where I was supervising. And so I was able to kind of do both at the same time because I didn't have to be as active. I was more there to put out fires and to make sure everybody showed up and everything. And so I could sit at my desk and have 2 windows open on my computer. And so if nobody needed me, I could switch over to the book and work on that. So that was very fortunate because I could imagine how hard it is when you have to work a full-time job and then get creative afterwards. But yeah, it's been very interesting. And I mean, this new book project is just another aspect of that journey because my father, you're right. He was very driven, and that was part of his coping mechanism. He very much associated his validation and his worth with how much he got done in a day. And so most of our connection was usually within something like golf or maybe working on something there, and so there wasn't a lot of talking, but there was that kind of communication. It was few and far between. He was busy, and of course, once my parents divorced, I was back and forth between the 2 of them, and then we spent, since he was in the military, and after my parents split, I lived with my mother for a couple of years, and then I went back with him when I was about 11, 12, and then we went from Texas back to Germany, and so I lived in the Nuremberg area for 4 years, from 12 to 16, and you grew up there. There's something about the teenage years in Europe with the freedom of movement and the buses and the trains and the subways. And I got into skateboarding and things. And so my teenage years were amazing. And then in some ways we lost even more opportunity to connect because he was always going off on movements and things. And I was always just out, and we had this routine, which is kind of funny now I think about it. Like I had to be home at midnight. So I would come home at midnight and he would be up reading. And then I would go into my room and then I would go to the bathroom. And so he knew I was home. I would come out of the bathroom and his light would be off and he'd be in bed, and I'd go to my room and sometimes sneak back out or, do whatever. But it was just a lack of awareness around how to truly, really connect. And it was just how we are. We used to actually joke about it, especially when I got into my 20s, that no news is good news. So if we weren't calling each other, that was good news. Everything was fine. Which is kind of I look at now like a coping mechanism of, well, we don't really know how to talk and connect, so this is just what we accept.
Exactly.
And it didn't really come to a head or really get to the point of me seeing what the big problem with that was until he was literally on his deathbed. He had pancreatic cancer, and I went to see him when he first started treatment, and he was still pretty active and still pretty good. We got to play golf, so things were pretty normal, except for he had white hair all of a sudden. Then the next time he called and said he was done with treatment because his quality of life had diminished so much that he was just done. So then I had to rush to go see him, and he was on so many pain meds and things. He slept like 23 hours a day. And then I went through this kind of gut wrenching thing of, I really want to connect. I want to have this final conversation with him, but he's only maybe awake an hour, if that much. And he's not very coherent because of all the drugs and things. And then of course, even thinking about it, it was kind of like, well, how do we even do that? How do I even, his wife at the time had said, well, if you want to go in and lay with him and snuggle him. And that was just such a non sequitur. Like, we don't do that. How would I, as much as I would crave that or would want to do that, how do we cross that bridge? And so it was really after his passing and going through that grief that I realized how much this had affected me and how much this was my calling and purpose in life, was to really do what I can to try to heal the father-son relationship in the country and the world, because so many of us, just out of ignorance, are creating these disconnected relationships. And then with as much going on with nice guy syndrome and the unhealthy masculinity in the world, these are really where those things start, is the connection between father and son, those relationships, and learning what healthy masculinity is. Because I did not. And so now I'm having to teach myself after the fact, and then doing things like I have my partner that I do my podcast with, that we talk about men's issues and things. But he's also, one of his purposes in life is to create rite of passages for young men, for teenage boys, so that they can have that point in their life that most of us, especially in our generation, we didn't have. And probably for many generations before, of now you're 12, 13, 14-year-old boy, you are becoming a man. Here's the line. Now you're crossing this line, coming into manhood, you're becoming a man. Because in my coaching practice, so many men that I work with, and I've run men's groups, and it was almost a 95% percentage of men that I worked with in these men's groups that didn't feel like men. They didn't have that I'm a man thing. They just felt like older boys. They felt like they were still this 16, 17, 18-year-old boy, but now their bodies had just aged. There was almost this lack of connection to I am a man now. And that's one of those things I think is very much leads down the path to isolation, disconnection, addiction, suicide, these unhealthy behaviors. Because yeah, I'm 30, 40 something year old male. Maybe inside I don't feel like a man. And so that makes me feel less than.
But you have described so many people that I meet, and that seems to be the common theme, so to speak. Interestingly enough, women are far more likely to speak out about that and have the insight about that. So if I look at the followers of the show, or the people who follow me on Instagram, it's probably what 90% of is women, who have had that insight and are trying now to reconnect. Many of the healers that I meet and the life coaches that I meet, they're all female. So it is so important that we have you and a small select group of people out there who taking on the man's world, however broken it is, and try to open our eyes to live our life authentically, to live a life that we can be proud of. And unfortunately for many men, that is work. That's what we do best. That's where we can define ourselves. That's where we can validate ourselves. And then when you come home, you might get sort of a relationship with your wife, and then you've got the children who haven't washed up, who haven't done this, haven't done that. And you can see where the frustration is. For me, often enough, I work very hard. I pride myself on working very hard. That's me. And often to my detriment, that I'm coming to a point close to burnout, or sometimes to burnout. And then I'm getting pissed off that I'm not getting the help that I deserve, that I want, that I love. And it is hard. It's hard to step out of that, to actually just take the camera out there and see what the hell is going on here. Why are you angry with your son? Because you have burned out and you now want help, but he doesn't give it to you. So it's all his fault. So, and that's where I catch myself again and again. So what I'm saying, guys out there, if you're listening to that or watching this, hell, I'm in exactly the same boat. Whilst I got my shit together, my ducks in a row, in many other aspects of my life, it's that relationship with my sons, and in all fairness, also with other people, that is probably something I need to work on. And here I am, 7 years down the line from after a lot of self-development. Yeah. You think you're finished after a while? You're right. Sorry, Jason, I was interrupting you.
Oh no, that's fine. It's an ongoing process, and it is interesting because the majority of my audience, especially in our podcast, we have a Mad Men of Masculinity podcast where we talk about male issues and things, and the majority of our audience is women, 35 to 55, who have had these experiences and are wanting to understand men more. And because a lot of times of just societal pressure, men are not supposed to ask for help or to, that's weakness, or to say there's something wrong and I'm missing something is to be weak and not masculine. And that's one of the things that has really come to the forefront, because with nice guy syndrome, which basically the quick history of nice guy syndrome is that since the turn of the century and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, before that, when we were an agrarian society and men and boys grew up on the farms next to their fathers in the fields or with the animals or whatever, they just had a natural education of masculinity. And then after the Industrial Revolution, men started going to factories and to businesses, and then they started leaving the homes. There was this natural progression to, well, now the rearing of the kids and the raising of the children is women's work. So the women stay home and raise the kids. And the women weren't always the most excited and happy with their husbands. So they were, I want to make sure my boy, my beautiful son, treats women well and is a lovely, wonderful, human being. But they were the boys weren't necessarily getting a healthy example of masculinity. They were learning what it means to be a man from their mothers, and then the school system is 95% feminine. So over several generations, we have several generations of men raised by women, and so we just didn't have this natural healthy example of masculinity. And so we've been trained to look to the feminine for our validation, because most of us in some form, fashion, or whatnot are mama's boys, or we look to, mom raised us, so we love our mothers, and then we've been raised to be gentlemen, and which are all great things. We need to have that emotional awareness and that side to us. However, we've forgotten the purpose and the foundational masculinity and that's why so many men nowadays don't feel like men, and they're so struggling in relationships because we've lost that foundational, purposeful, I'm a man piece, which comes from that inner work. But without having an example, a lot of times you just assume, well, maybe I'm not a man, or maybe I don't know. And so our examples nowadays, since most of our fathers are either absentee because they work, they're absentee because of divorce, or absentee because of just emotional ignorance, we learn from TV and movies and books what a man is. And that doesn't usually lead to healthy relating.
No, I keep laughing because if I think back at my role models of the 80s, it was Mel Gibson and Lethal Weapon. It was the kind of broken heroes there who wake up, take a piss whilst they have a fac and a beer, and it's, exactly. But I can't blame Mel Gibson. We can blame him for a lot of things, but that's going one step too far. But it just reflects. I think it's a sign of where I was seeking my heroes, where I was seeking the definition. What is a man? What is a man? Because I didn't have the father figures in my life. So same story there. It seems to be a repeating kind of thing. The more you actually talk to people, it is something similar coming up. And I think it's also fair to say that whilst we now recognize that we need to do some work there, it's pretty hard to undo 30, 40 years of beliefs, of things that you thought were right, and that is the way it is. And now suddenly people like you and me are coming along and say, well, actually, how did that go so far? And chances are it didn't probably go so well. I think for those of you listening out there, I think there's one thing to be said. The past does not equal the future. Okay? So at any one moment in time, you have a choice, or many choices, in fact, but let's boil it down to one choice. Right now, you made the choice of watching this. You made the choice of listening and trying to understand maybe some of aspects of your own life. So that is a choice. That is a conscious choice. You took action to actually come here. And for that, I commend you guys. Now the next step is to let that seed literally land in the soil up there and let water it and actually see, okay, that actually makes sense. So how would you go about it? And that question is to you guys out there, but also to you, Jason. How do men actually come? Well, actually, first of all, it's the girls that come to you. There you go, the 95%. So, see, we're barking up the wrong tree, for crying out loud. How do we get men to listen to something like that?
Well, funny enough, it does tend to be the women leading the way, and it's almost a abbreviated 12-step process. It's the awareness, it's the education piece. And so one of the reasons I tend to focus mainly on working with couples and people in relationship, once they understand what they're dealing with, and because it's not just nice guy syndrome, it's not just unhealthy masculinity. A lot of women just as a response to nice guy syndrome have kind of fallen into the superwoman syndrome, where they spend a lot of time in their masculinity. You know, they run their businesses, they run the households, they're the mother, they're the CEO, and they also have to look cute doing it. And then of course they've adopted the most unhealthy masculine trait of, well, I cannot ask for help because that's weakness, and so I have to be all things to everybody without asking for help. And then they have all these nice guys running around at their heels going, what do you need? What do you need? I want to help you. I want to help you. And so maybe they'll throw them a bone occasionally, let them help, but they have no sexual attraction to those men because they're not stepping into their masculinity and they don't respect them. And so it's this convoluted mess we've got ourselves into of men losing their masculine and becoming more feminine, women kind of stepping out of their feminine to become more masculine so they can take over and do like mothers do, which is take care of the house, which is take care of business. And so it's educating so that we can educate the men about why they're struggling in relationships, why they're struggling these ways, and start that healing process of stepping back into their masculine in a healthy way, not in the Mel Gibson, Lethal Weapon, John Wayne, old paradigm of masculine, but in a healthy way. And then getting the women to feel safe to let down their guard a little bit, to give over, and then to create those healthy partnerships where we can actually work together instead of the competitive thing. We talk a lot about how in relationships today, it's very difficult if you're not aware that both men and women run masculine and feminine energies. And if they're both out in the workforce, they're both in their masculine energy, they're task oriented, they're goal oriented. And then they come home and they need to do this shift. But if you're not aware of it, you're not consciously shifting. So then you tend to have the men and women come home and they're masculine and start butting heads. And so we educate a lot of our men like, okay, now that you are aware of these two different paradigms going on, when your woman comes home, it's time for you to take action and to help her get out of her masculine. So it's like, hey, honey, welcome home. Here's a glass of wine. Let's get you in your sweats. Let's put your hair up. Let's get you to relax. And as she gets back into her feminine, then you can create the polarity, which is necessary for healthy relating and sexual attraction. However, when we're running the same energies and we don't know, no wonder divorce rates are 50%. No wonder relationships are very hard to have because we're just unaware of what's actually going on within us and within our relationship. So that education piece is the first one, especially in relationships. When you educate yourself with your partner and start to look at that together and it becomes something you do together, you want to create a healthy, strong foundation, based relationship. It's working through these things together and educating each other together. Then as you're learning and growing together, you're kind of growing together, literally, and creating a much more strong bond and foundation.
Damn. Lots of food for thought there. God, I so hope that many men will listen to that, but also women will listen to that, because you have actually boiled it down in half an hour to some very powerful insights that, if taken on appropriately and acted upon, should create a much more beautiful relationship in a marriage. After all, opposites attract, and that is a force of nature. And if we suddenly both try to become the work, and then crash, there is not so much of attraction there, is there? Interesting.
And it is a powerful tool to it. Well, when I see, because one of the things I think we're dealing with too is there's that old plastic perfect mentality from the 80s and 90s of there's nothing wrong with me and I'm all perfect and I have these smooth edges, so there's nothing to grab onto. And what I'm finding, especially working with couples, once you let that go and say, I'm not broken, I just have these unhealthy patterns that I want to work on, and you start to work on that together, then you get into those, there's those sharp pieces, there's those little jagged edges, but that's where we can grip onto. And it's so amazing. I can talk to a couple for 5 minutes and it just kind of pinpoint personality things or just little things that they may have been in dealing with. Then they start laughing, and almost invariably, the woman or the man or the woman will look at the other one and go, "Oh, that's why you do that. I always wondered why you did that." And it's just the so much fun because with those educational pieces, relationships stop becoming such a work and becomes more of an awareness and an acceptance piece. Because when we don't know, every time our partner is triggered, we think it's our fault, and vice versa. But when we understand their triggers and their traumas and the things that they're working on, we can be loving support and helping them heal, but not taking it on as our personal responsibility, which is a huge thing.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm bloody tempted to become a guest of not just of your show, that we talk about that after this show, but to become a guest in your program, and maybe together with my son, actually, and just do some work here together, because there is so much that we all can do to just hold a mirror in front of our face and have a really good look and say, is that really the life you want to live? Is that really, are you happy? Are you truly happy? Or are you just putting up that facade, that mask, even to yourself? And I certainly for a long time have done that. And my suspicion now, the way your words resonate in me, means that there is still a mask up there that I have just discovered. Which really pisses me off.
that brings up because I always, especially for the guys, and when we do the pod, there's some great books out there that cover a lot of these issues. Like No More Mr. Nice Guy is probably the first one by Dr. Robert Glover that I tell people to read. But then talking about The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis Howes, because men don't have just one. We probably have 8 to 12 that we normally switch between. And so talking about not just taking off one mask, but taking off several masks and understanding that we don't need to be the workaholic, achiever, hero, alpha male, stoic, all these different things, and just being able to be present with ourselves, which I think for men is probably the hardest thing. And that's usually where the healthy relationships come from, is being present and honest with our families and with our partners and saying, I'm actually feeling this right now and I need to deal with this, or I would like your support, or just even verbalizing, because that's part of that old masculine paradigm. We don't talk about it. We just don't talk. And so having healthy outlets to talk about it. And sometimes in father-son relationships, those can become those healthy outlets. Because as your son comes to you with something, you can relate to that and say, oh yeah, I dealt with that and this is what I learned. And you can create those kind of more intimate connections in that way. It starts with us. It starts with us being willing to be uncomfortable, which is sometimes the hardest thing.
No, I've learned that lesson, but to then apply that lesson and modify it to accept the same in different settings in your life, I think that's the important one, especially to your children, because there you are, for years you have been trying to be, well, I'm the dad and I teach you, so there is this kind of natural relationship there. But then that paradigm sort of shifts a bit, because at some stage you want this young person to grow up, and there will be uncomfortable times, often enough rows, because that person is spreading their wings, sometimes in not so nice ways. It's all part and parcel. And then to now open yourself up, to not be, but I said so because I'm your father, but rather to actually say, well, I know, been there.
Yeah,
And
that's I actually learned the hard way by kind of being on as the son in that relationship. You know, it was we had a very good relationship because of that hierarchy. You know, he was the father, I was the son. But then once I got into my late teens and 20s and got out of the house, became much and much harder for us to connect because I wanted to be myself and have him respect who I'm becoming. And of course, that didn't jive with the father son dynamic. And one of the things too, I've found that as parents and as the older generation raising these children, a lot of times we feel it's our responsibility. We've kind of been given this false idea that these children are these empty vessels that we need to pour all of our wisdom and things in so that they can learn and grow and become the best person. However, if you've been around any child from birth to 7 years old, you know they have their own unique personalities and they are kind of who they are. And so learning to go to figure out who they are, what their strengths are, kind of what their personality is, and work with that and groom that. Because I think there's a lot of times parents put a lot of pressure on themselves to say, I have to make sure this person, my child, doesn't have any negative, experiences or doesn't have these challenges. And if we didn't have our challenges, we wouldn't be the people we are now. And so it's sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot by trying not to work with who our children are, but trying, because I know for me, it was kind of this, and it wasn't said directly, but it was just a story. It was a story that I created after a while in my head of don't be myself. Whatever I do, don't be who I am, be who they want me to be. And so unprogramming that and uncovering that has been a long process that still goes on, because it's when I get uncomfortable, sometimes I can slide right back into people pleasing and becoming whoever they need me to be so that I feel more comfortable instead of being who I am authentically in that moment, so it's can be a hard process, especially when you've not been doing that. But it's like you said, you're here now, you're watching this, you're listening to this, you can choose today to shift. And then one step leads to the next step, and then it starts that cascade effect. So it doesn't have to be so hard. It can be as simple as, son, I haven't done everything right, and I didn't know everything, and now I'm learning things, and I want to work with you. Instead of, especially with the understanding the shifts of childhood, when they need you, when they start to pull away, and what those patterns are and why they're necessary, and work with that. I feel so bad for a lot of my friends now, being in my 40s, so many of their kids are leaving the house and they're just struggling with empty nest syndrome because they didn't prepare themselves along the way. They're just like, that's my child, they're always gonna be my child, and where are you going? And we can look at just, all right, from this time to this time, they're in this growth period, and this time to this time, and this age to this age, they're doing this. And from this age to this age, they're going to start going through this process of individualization and learning to get out into the world. And so we can do our best to support that. I mean, I'm sure, as any parent knows, it's not easy to watch your child that you've been so solely responsible for to suddenly become independent and start to leave and not need you as much. But if we're aware of that, we can at least mitigate it a little bit, make it a little less scarring and jarring.
And I guess it's our time to realize that these things have to be, and that we cannot change them. I mean, I've learned to ride the waves of anxiety, the waves of negative emotions. I've learned to accept that they are not there forever. That's good, but it's still, when you're in the middle of a prolonged wave, more like a tsunami of change that will leave your life completely. Well, it can be devastating, but your life has changed forever, because you can't hold that tsunami back. You can't hold back your youngsters becoming their own individual persons and wanting to leaving their mark on humanity. So yes, it is damn heavy duty shit we are talking about today, for me, actually. So lots and lots of fall. Hey, this is Jason. You're a great guy, and if you stir up so many emotions in me, it must be the same with many of my listeners. If they want to get hold of you, if they want to work with you, how does that work?
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. If you're on the internet, you're on social media, jasonbkendrick.com is my address. JASONBKENDRICK, all one word. That's my website. I do group coaching, individual coaching. I have spiritual tourism trips that I do. And then the books and things that we're working on as well. Plus, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, Jason B Kendrick, you can find me on there, and just reach out with questions, reach out with needs. The nice thing too is like I have these amazing friends like you and some of my other friends I work with. So we can, if I'm not the perfect one to work for you, I know we're gonna find somebody. So please, like take the step, ask for help, because we all need help. We all need support, because this is a nonstop, ongoing, growing journey. Every time I feel like I've got it handled, I shift to the next level, and it's the next lesson. And so, don't feel bad. We're all in it together.
And it is. And guys, the other thing I want to say, many men are into sport. You will not find an Olympic athlete without a performance coach, without someone who guides him. The coach is always instrumental in that, in teams as well as in individual sports. I mean, if you go to top CEOs of 500 companies, you will not find a single one without not a performance coach. They call them a bit different, but it's basically they want to have someone who is holding them accountable, who is working with them so that they can come out and be the best person ever. Well,
yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Yeah.
And here we are. Oh, no. I know it all better. Hey, I'm
that's 45. A great point too. As you're looking, if you make that choice and you decide you want to have a coach, make sure your coach has a coach.
Oh,
you don't want to have somebody who's coaching you from that I know everything point. If they're not growing themselves and learning themselves, there's going to be a plateau and a limit of what they can help you with.
So good point.
If they're not, because I have my coaches, I have my coach and he has his coach, and then they sometimes both gang up on me when I need it. So make sure your coach has a coach as you're looking.
And it just shows, because I think the more we learn on this journey, the more we accept that we're only just scratching the surface of this black box up there, and that maybe we have addressed some of the issues, but there's so many more that we could address and be better people in the near future. And that's the tantalizing thing for me. That's why I get up at 6 a.m. to talk to people like Jason. And then soon I go to work and do a full day work. That is why I do that, because I recognize every day with these interviews that I'm doing how much I can still improve, how much work there is still to be done, and not as a chore, but as a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to grow into the person that I want to be. So the question is, who do you want to be when you grow up? Well, that question keeps coming and coming and coming, because I keep growing, and I love that.
Yeah, so I think Jason, the biggest thing to keep in mind too as we do this, because we're always growing, is how fast do you want to grow? Because you can do it on your own and it'll be the slow plodding process, or you can have help and join with other people who are also growing, and then multiply the speed exponentially.
Exactly. And I think that's where the coach comes in. That's where essentially those people come in, and you choose your coaches, and you might have several coaches down the line, or even parallel, depending upon the priorities that you set yourself right in this phase of your life. And that is beautiful. So my coaches were sobriety initially, but nowadays my coaches are far more mindfulness, are far more living life to the fullest. And now maybe addressing the different male masks that I'm wearing. Damn, it never stops. But I wouldn't have it any other way, guys.
Right.
I wouldn't have it any other way, because this is me. This is being alive. This is being that little bit out there, uncomfortable, enough uncomfortable for me now to recognize, actually, I don't need to wait until I'm this uncomfortable there. I recognized, hey, hang on, I'm uncomfortable because I've actually found something else where I can improve. Cool, let's do it.
Yeah. And that's
And that,
always a good point to keep in mind too, that change is inevitable, change is going to happen,
yeah,
and you really have only two choices. You can either be swept up by the tsunami of change and just be turned in the wave, or you can get up on top of it and surf it. That's about
exactly.
the conscious, it's going to happen.
Mm.
So which do you prefer, the tumble dryer in the middle of the wave, or do you want to be on top of it surfing
Trust me, guys, for 45 years I tumbled. Oh, yeah. And there were a few bottles coming my way. Oh, there's
it?
another one.
Yes.
Oh, there's another one.
Yeah. Yep. That was me too.
So cool. Jason, I feel this is not the last interview we have done. We will explore other parts of your and my
I feel we have
journey.
many more things to uncover and to discuss. Yeah.
I think so too. But for now, today, I leave you all guys out there with these beautiful insights with regards to the masculinity and with regards to our opportunities that we have as men to relook at ourselves and really ask the questions, are we happy with where we are at? And if you are content and your relationship is all beautiful and you feel that the relationship with your children is wonderful, I'm so pleased for you. I'm really, really, really am. The chances are it is not. It is not. It is.
We always have some place we want to improve, and that's just human
Exactly.
nature. So
Exactly. So here, if you get a chance, you could do far, far, far worse than actually get in touch with Jason. Read his book. Show us your book, please.
I have two books.
Books.
It's Not Your Life, It's You, which if you go on my website, you can find them, and they're also on Amazon, on Kindle. Those are really about the power of perspective and looking at your life through the point of choice. That maybe I chose to have this father, maybe I chose to have these experiences within my life, and what did I learn from them, and having that help to lead you to maybe your purpose or maybe your passion. And because I know, especially in Western culture, there's a lot of victim mentality. Oh, it's not my fault. It's my parents' fault. It's the school system's fault. It's my economical upbringing's fault. And as we all know, we don't get out of childhood unscathed. But once you become an adult, no matter what happened, it's your responsibility to heal it and work with it. And that usually starts with a shift in mindset. So perspective is really the key.
Nice. And we both have got soon another book to add to it there. From Breakdown to Wake Up is a work that both of us have contributed to. It's a multi-author book where we have got 16 authors telling 16 different stories, but all highlighting that, like a phoenix out of the ashes, you need to burn first to learn the lessons, and then you arise as the new phoenix, as the version 2.0, as the upgrade. And it was a beautiful project to work with. It's in pre-sale now. But by the time, unfortunately, when this interview airs, we are well out there. You can go straight to the internet, to Amazon, and get it there. And for those of you who can't remember big things like long names, jasonbkendrick.com, for example, just look down there. In the description of the video and the podcast, you will have the information there. But equally, there will be a link towards our book, From Breakdown to Wake Up, and some 16 beautiful stories that might rattle your cage, that might make you listen up and maybe ask, is that really the life that I want to live? Or if these guys could transform into the better versions of themselves, maybe I can do too. And I think that would be a beautiful, beautiful outcome of you reading our book.
I agree.
Jason, thank you so much for coming onto my show. It was an absolute honor.
Thank you so much, Stefan. I mean, I knew we were going to have fun, but that was so much more fun than I thought we were going to have. So.
It's beautiful, the people that we meet nowadays, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah. And you guys out there, look after yourself. Make the most out of this day. Make choices. Don't let life live you. Just think, okay, what do I want to do now? You want to have a burger for breakfast? Make that choice. That's cool. Treat yourself for what it is. That obviously gives you something. Or you could say, well, okay, I eat something healthy now. or I choose to rehydrate. I choose to go out and have a look at Jason's book. That's absolutely cool. You could go out there and have a look at my book. That is absolutely cool too. You could also choose to subscribe to this channel. You could choose to leave a review on this channel. There are many things you can choose. So choose wisely. Guys out there, look after yourself. Jason, to you, have a fantastic day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.